I have two clarifications. First, I don't seem to recall either of the ministers clarifying the questions raised by Ms. He and Ms. Phua about whether MAS needs this bill. In other words, does MAS not have sufficient power within its current jurisdiction to take into account the public interest in having affordable financial products, and therefore, actually, is this bill really necessary? I don't recall either minister touching on this point. Second is a clarification for Minister Chee. Would he at least acknowledge that what Parliament is being asked to do today is to pass this legislation that is targeted at a live transaction, a particular one, to introduce a legislative change that would affect that live transaction? And does he not acknowledge that this sends a very bad signal to the business community about business certainty?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I had actually covered both points in my closing speech earlier, but Ms. Lim may have missed it, so if, with your permission, Madam, can I just read those sections again? Huh?
Please proceed.
Thank you. So this is what I said earlier, that the bill does not affect any completed transaction because there's no formal application yet by Allianz to obtain effective control and become a substantial shareholder of Income. And therefore, there is no retrospective application of the law. So that is what I have said. There's no formal application yet by Allianz. Second, the point about why MAS doesn't have the powers, I've also explained this, that the existing sections 26 and 27 of the Insurance Act, there isn't an explicit provision under the Insurance Act for MAS to take into account the views of MCCY, which will include questions relating to social mission in assessing a proposed acquisition of an insurer with cooperative links. So we can't rely on the existing provisions without this set of amendments. And because it is a proposal that is under consideration by shareholders, there is urgency. So yes, we don't disagree that there is a deal that is being considered, but it is a fact, sir, that there is no formal application by Allianz to MAS.
Thank you, sir. I have two clarifications for the Minister in charge of MAS and one clarification for the Minister of MCCY. In relation to my clarification for the Minister in charge of MAS, I think the Minister mentioned twice that there was no formal application made by Allianz in relation to this proposed acquisition of the majority share stake in Income. So I just wanted to ask some clarification because in the proposed new section 33A of the Act, in subsection 9, it states, and I quoted this in my speech actually, this section applies also to a relevant application received by the authority before the date of commencement of the Insurance Amendment Act 2024 that is still pending as of that date. So if there was, can the Minister clarify whether this refers to to this transaction or another transaction? So that's my first clarification. And then my second clarification relates to the urgency, the points that I made about why the urgency of this bill, that such that, within 3 days this was actually going to be, it needs to be passed, going through second and third reading. So I think the question here is that the Minister mentioned earlier that the reason why we are rushing through this bill under a certificate of urgency is because this deal is under active consideration by shareholders. But from my understanding of this, shareholders can vote however they want, they can consider however they want, but honestly, the offer is ultimately subject to regulatory approval, and that's why it's called a preconditional offer on the offer document. So I'm just wondering, given that, also mentioned in my speech, given that the long stop date is 9 months from the date of announcement, why is there this rush to do this?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to confirm that there's no formal application from Allianz to MAS. The provision that Ms. He mentioned, that is inserted more for avoidance of doubt. The second point that Ms. He raised, This bill is urgent. We need a certificate of urgency because the due is under consideration by shareholders. So by having a long period between the first reading and the second reading before the law, the amended law takes effect, actually we give rise to more uncertainty in the market and for the parties concerned. And that's why we are putting forth this bill for Parliament's consideration and for approval.